welcome back to the Axe Guitar Show, your one-stop shop for tremolo tips and tricks. Today we're checking out a trem that's been making waves across the guitar world, and it's part of this up-and-coming wave of all these new tremolos that have built upon the Floyd Rose model and made it a lot better, a lot more ergonomic, and a lot more friendly and player-friendly to the guitarist. This is the Tremoline FT36, and the question we're asking is this the best alternative to the original Floyd Rose, or will this actually kill the Floyd Rose? Before we get into the specs of this bad boy, let's talk about where it's from, where it's made, and just a little bit of background. Tremoline trems are handmade in Sofia, Bulgaria, and they're owned by a man named Teodor Maslarov. As you can tell here, Tremoline really does take a piece of steel and transform it into a piece of art. And they do all this at the price tag of 273 American dollars, which once you see what this thing comes with and the standard features and how it plays, it goes well beyond the value of that price tag. All right, so let's dive into why the FT36 is such a game-changing tremolo with its specs. The entire trem, and I mean the entire trem, is milled from stainless steel. And you can really see how it's milled. You can actually see the milling marks and stuff like that. So you know you're getting a trem that's made in the factory and it's made well. So there's no casting, everything's milled. And then you flip this over and we have stainless steel springs, noiseless springs that come with the tremolo when you buy it. And then if you take a look here, yeah, that's the springs that are actually held onto the tremolo block with a plate right there. So unlike an original Floyd Rose where the springs are shoved into the tremolo block, these are actually secured to the block themselves, definitely bringing down the noise or any potential slippage. And this tremolo's been designed in a way where if you look at the saddles, you can see the string comes out of the saddle very gradually and it maintains contact with it all the way through. Now this does reduce string breakage because of the contact points, and it really allows for that smooth transition from the tremolo, from the strings up to the nut. And speaking of the nut, Tremoline has really thought just about everything. If you take off these clamps, you can see there's little channels where the strings actually lie. And that just provides more security when you clamp these down and less slippage. It's pretty impressive. Now, I could go into a whole section about how this is a low pro design and very ergonomic, but I could probably just show you. I mean, look at how flat that thing is. That is way more flat than a Floyd Rose. It doesn't have any protruding fine tuning screws. They're there and they're kind of out of the way, and everything about this really gives your hand the freedom to just kind of be where it wants. It almost feels like a hardtail. And this is so nice because the overall footprint of this trem is so small. It's just a lot smaller in terms of how high it is and the actual dimensions. And you can see the saddle screws right here on the back are kind of embedded in the saddles. So they're not sticking out, and you don't have to really worry about a route on your guitar being specific because this really will fit most routes since it's so compact. All right, now let's talk about tuning stability, probably something that you're the most concerned about with a floating tremolo. And this one has very low friction contact points at the knife edges. You can feel just how smooth this is, and you can tell it translates into better tuning when you play. We already talked about the locked springs on the block providing less slippage and better tuning stability. And then if you look here, you actually have a milled, fully metal stainless steel tremolo claw. So when you bring it all together, the low friction contact points at the knife edges, the locked springs on the tremolo block, and then the milled steel tremolo claw, you can tell this thing is just built like a tank. And it's really small, so it's like a really small, strong tank. But then it translates to really good tuning stability because everything's super solid. And that's one of the biggest things I get from my audience about their tremolo coming out of tune. It doesn't stay in tune. It's because there's weak components throughout the chain. This thing is a very strong chain all the way through. All right, let's talk about the tremolo arm briefly real quick. This is a screw-on tremolo arm. You can see it just rotates right there. And it screws into kind of a plastic bushing. And you might be thinking to yourself, plastic? I thought this was all stainless steel. Let's talk about that for just a second. So the tremolo arm slides in and screws into that plastic sleeve, which makes it completely noiseless and then also holds it in place where you want it. And then also, let's consider this compared to the original Floyd Rose. The original Floyd Rose has that union nut that you screw onto the tremolo, and that thing always fails. The threads go out, it gets noisy because it's held on by a sleeve if it gets loose. that remedies all of that. This, when you use it, you'll be very impressed at the smoothness and how it stays in place despite not having to be screwed in very tight. Now I'd like to highlight these fine tuners for just a second. We already talked about how they add to that kind of very low profile design, but one of my only gripes is that they're pretty small and it's hard for my fat fingers to kind of wrap around them to fine tune it. The fine tuning screws are actually screwed right into the base plate of this tremolo, which provides a great anchor point when you go to intonate the saddles, which we're getting into intonation, which is my favorite feature of this tremolo. When Tremoline designed this tremolo, they really thought about the frustrations and the actual opinions of the people that play it. And that is really reflected in how they designed the intonation, or how to intonate this tremolo. And let me show you. First of all, the saddle retaining screws are off center of the string. So in Floyd Rose trems, you usually have the string and it goes right above the saddle retaining screws. So you either have to loosen the string to really get there to loosen it. You can push the string aside sometimes, but it is really cumbersome in getting a tool in there. With the Tremoline, this saddle retaining screw is actually offset off of the string for easy access, so you can loosen the saddle and move it to make it more sharp or flat. Secondly, Tremoline has your wallet in mind. With the Floyd Rose, you kind of have to buy an aftermarket intonation tool to really intonate this thing while the strings are on, but no, not with the Tremoline. They provide their own tool in the box when you buy it. This really is a game changer. You just screw it in the back of the saddle, and because the fine tuning screw is actually anchored onto the base plate of the tremolo, it provides that friction and that contact point, and you just adjust the intonation tool. Make sure you actually loosen the saddle retaining screws, but you just adjust as needed, cinch the saddle retaining screw down, and you're done. It's really that easy. You don't have to worry about saddles popping off the guitar, nothing like that. All right, and before we demo this thing, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and I mean a huge elephant. This is the sustain block that's on this tremolo. This thing is a huge, fat tremolo block that's 100% stainless steel that will really improve any sustain of any guitar you install this on. Now, for those of you that raise a very important concern, does the tremolo block, is it too big for some of the routes out there? I'll tell you what, this fit better than some of the original Floyd Roses that I put in my guitars when I put aftermarket Floyd Roses into the recessed trems. This actually fit better because how it's situated on the tremolo. I have equal space and a lot of good movement for the tremolo block to actually freely move in the recess route. Now, speaking of routing and retrofitting, the Tremoline FT36 is really designed to be a direct swap for any Floyd Rose product out there, specifically the original Floyd Rose, the Floyd Rose 1000 series, and the Floyd Rose Special. Bottom line, in my experience, zero additional woodwork to throw one of these in. All right, guys, enough talking about this beautiful trem. Let's demo it so you can see how it really performs. We'll do some riffage and then some leads, but then also we will squeal the living hell out of this thing and put it through some abuse so you could see just how smooth it really is. But right before that, as always, guys, if you enjoy the content, consider subscribing below so you don't miss the latest videos about tremolo tips and tricks. Let's do it! All right, guys, so there's the demo. What did you think? My take from a playing standpoint is that this really feels like almost a hardtail when you're playing with it. I barely even noticed the trem. And I gotta be honest with you, this is probably the most fluid trem that I've ever used. I mean, it really feels like it's rocking on air. And you know, because of its small design and the tremolo block and just the whole package, it really makes the squeals and everything and the range of motion of the trem just phenomenal. It's really, really impressive. In terms of the overall build, the things that I'm really impressed with is up here at the nut, it's got those grooves and channels that the strings lie in. I don't really know if this provides an actual mechanical or tuning benefit, but it sits right there when you're putting new strings on, and it makes me feel like they're just sitting there nice and comfy. But for real, the things that I'm most impressed by are the offset saddle retaining screws, and then how these saddles are so smooth and nice to the string as it comes out of the saddle. You can tell that these things are built with, you know, longevity in mind. This tremolo, they don't want you breaking strings. And something we didn't really talk about in the specs, these saddle blocks that are in each individual saddle are kind of rounded. They're like little ovals. And that's really nice because it really provides great contact in the saddle for the string and there's no slippage. And lastly, what I love is just the entire system from the beginning of where the strings go in all the way to the back where the actual claw is. I mean, this thing's all stainless steel. It's been milled to perfection and you can tell all these pieces were thought out thoroughly by Theodore. All right, guys, so I love this trim, but I wanna know what you think. Let us know in the comments. Do you have one of these? Is it something that you're gonna get? Or do you just hate it? And with that, I look forward to keeping this on my guitar for a very long time, and then we will see you guys in the next video. Later.